Jai Hind everyone, myself Sandeep Yadav. Today I am going to deliver a lecture on requirement engineering. This requirement engineering is basically part of software engineering curriculum. Now we will be discussing the following content in today's lecture. We will be introducing the concept of user and system requirements, and we will be also describing the functional and the non-functional requirements. Also, we will be explaining how requirement gathering may be done. Basically, we are dealing with certain aspects of the requirement engineering in this lecture. Well, requirement, everyone knows requirement. What are requirements? These are the expectations from the customer side. So, first we will be dealing with what is requirement. So, basically requirement engineering is the disciplined application of proven principles, method, tools and notation to describe a proposed system, intended behavior and its associated constraints. That is, we are using engineering concept in engineering concept basically are having certain methodologies, certain proven facts. So, requirement engineering is all about proposing a intended system behavior and its constraints, how to gather the functionalities from the customer. Requirement engineering produce a large document that is written in a simple language, in a natural language like Hindi, English, French or etc. And it contains a description of what the system will do without explaining how the system will do. Basically, requirement engineering deals with what part of the system, that is what the system, proposed system will do, what will the functionalities, what will the specialities, what will the details of the systems without specifying the how part of the system. That how part is not deal, that is we need not to diverge into the technical specifications as to how to implement the things, just we need to find out what are the desirable things that we want in our proposed system. The input to the requirement engineering is the problem statement prepared by the customer and the output is SRS, that is prepared by the developer. Basically, the input being given is problem statement. For example, if suppose we are preparing a result management system for our MTech student, then we have to provide the problem statement, that is the university people will provide the problem statement to the to the developer side, that is how many semesters are in their MTech, how many subjects are in their each semester, whether how much marks are there for each subject, that is whether the subject is core or elective, internal marks are 100 or external marks are 50 or internal are 50, external are 100, and how much percentage of marks are devoted to the practical or dissertations, that is, and how a student is being promoted from one semester to another semester, what credit he must have. So, these sort of the problem statements are being prepared by the customer side and given to the developer side, that is problem statement is being prepared by the customer and the output is SRS, that is being prepared by the developer. SRS is basically software requirement specifications and that is developed by the developer, which contain all the functional, non-functional requirements, user requirements, system requirements, interface requirements, design considerations, all of the things are being documented in SRS. The requirement themselves are the descriptions of the system, services and the constraints that are generated during the requirement engineering process. Basically, requirements are gathered from the customers, and who gathers? It is the developer sides who gather the requirements from the customer. This requirement engineering is perhaps one of the most critical phase in software development because it is very difficult to uncover the requirements. Many of the requirements are even not known to the customer side, so they keep evolving over duration of the time. Sometimes the new requirements come after we have given the previous requirement. So, the requirement gathering itself is a time consuming activity, and it is also a cumbersome activity as it requires a lot of time. Second, we are now, what are the requirements? Software requirements. Software requirements basically are the descriptions of the features or the functionalities of the target system, that is the system that we want to develop. Requirements convey expectations of the user from the software product, that is what the customer want, what the customer want from the our intended product, that is the software product that we want to produce, that is the developer that want to produce. For example, in our result preparation system for MTech, what the customer wants, that is we must be able to display the result of the students. So, then that too in a good, that should have the good GUI, that is graphic user interface. So, user interface is also very necessary. Second, a software requirement may also be specified as a condition or the capability that must be met or possessed by the system to satisfy the contract, that is the contract with the developer and the customer side, the standards, the norms, the specifications or other formally imposed document, means certain conditions have been agreed previously. So, that is the requirement, software requirement. So, requirements are basically gathered by the developer from the customers, they both sit together and discuss the things and sort out the requirements. We shall see later on how the requirements are being gathered. Now, different types of requirements that are there are the user requirements, system requirements, functional requirements, non-functional requirements and the domain requirements. So, first we will see what are the user requirements. User requirements are basically the requirements of the user or the customers that are written in natural language, that is the language, what are natural language means, not the, like C or C++ or the Java, these are not the natural language. Natural language are the languages that have evolved over last thousands years, that is the language in which we people use. We don't need artificial language to specify the user requirements. So, the requirement have to be mentioned in natural language, not artificial language. Plus, any diagram will be useful of the services that the system provide and various constraints. So, this basically user requirements document is being written for the customer. Next is system requirement, that is a structured document that set out the detailed descriptions of the system functions, services and operational constraint. It defines what should be implemented, so that may become a part of contract between the client and the contractor or the developer side or the software company. Basically, system requirements itself are derived from the user requirements. So, whatever are the requirements of the users, accordingly the system requirements will be there. Next is functional requirements. These are the foremost requirements that are desired from the system. These basically defines the functionalities, various features or the services that our software has to provide. These depend on the type of software, means what type of software we want to produce, whether it is generalized product or whether it is specialized product, what is the expectation of the users and the type of the system where the software is to be used. Functional requirements may be high level statement of what the system should do, but these requirements should describe the system services in detail. The system services must be described in detail in functional requirements. Next are the non-functional requirements. These are basically quality related requirements, that is these are not a part of functional requirements. These define the system properties and the constraint, that is reliability, that system must continue to provide services in spite of the failure. Response time, how much time it is taking, how much is the storage requirement, and various constraints, that is IO devices capability, system representations. Process requirement may also be specified mandatorily using a case system, programming language, development methods. Non-functional requirement may be more critical than requirements. See, if these non-functional requirements are not met, our entire system is useless, because if we are not maintaining the quality parameters, we are not maintaining the functional requirements, we are not having the reliability, availability, maintainability, response time, storage requirements, fulfillment, then the software is of no use, that is it will not be able to meet the expectation of the users. So, these requirements are mandatorily to be fulfilled, otherwise it will not be beneficial for the customer. Next is domain requirements. Domain requirement may be expressed using specialized domain. Domain requirements may be expressed using specialized domain terminology or reference to domain concepts. Because these requirements are specialized, so software engineer always find it very difficult to understand how they are related to the other system requirements. So, a domain specific person should also be there, so that the requirements could be carried out. Domain requirement may be new requirements, constraints on existing, or define the specific computations. If the domain requirements are not satisfied, the system will not be workable. It is being reiterated that these requirements must be fulfilled in order to have the working system. Next, we must document whatever the requirement that we gather, we must be documented in a form of document that is known as SRS, Software Requirement Specifications. This SRS establishes the basis of agreement between a client and the developer on what the software product will do. It provides a reference for the validation of the product, because these requirements are gathered from the customer. So, when the product will be ready, we will be validating it with the SRS, that is these are the expectations of the customer and these must be fulfilled by our software. A high quality SRS is prerequisite to a high quality software. If the SRS is itself poor, then we cannot expect to have a high quality software, because we will not be able to gather all the requirements properly, we will not be able to produce a high quality software. And a high quality SRS also reduce the development costs. So, these are the reasons why do we require SRS. Basically, SRS is a contract between the customer side and the developer side, expressing the expectation of the customers, and it must be duly fulfilled by the developer side at the end of the development life cycle. Now, requirement engineering processes. The processes that are used for requirement engineering widely depend on the application, domain, people involved and the organization developing the requirements. However, there are basic activities, generic activities that are common for all, that is requirement elicitation, requirement analysis, requirement documentation and requirement review. So, given is a diagram which illustrates the crucial steps of requirement engineering. The input is the problem statement, that is the feasibility study, and the output is SRS. These are the four basic processes that are being involved in requirement engineering. First is requirement elicitation, second is requirement analysis, third is requirement documentation and fourth is requirement review. So, these are the four basic steps that are there in the requirement engineering. We will be discussing some of the aspects of these steps. So, requirement analysis is known as the gathering of the requirement. Here the customer gather the requirement. Here the requirements are gathered from the customer by the developer sides if they are available. So, requirement are to be gathered from the customer. So, basically this is a requirement gathering state. Next is analysis. Now the requirement analysis means that the analysis of the requirement start with the requirement elicitation itself. When we start gathering the requirement, this phase automatically starts. So requirements are analyzed in order to find out the inconsistency and the defects. That is, we have to maintain the consistency, we have to remove any defects also. That is done in requirement analysis. Now next step is requirement documentation. That is, this is the end product of the requirement elicitation and analysis. Documentation is very necessary because no one remembers what one talked with each other. So it will be beneficial to have the document. Documentation is the only thing that helps to perform the better quality software, to have the better quality software, because person come and goes. Only the documentation that is available, that will help in the knowledge transfer when a new person comes. So how he will be doing all those things, he need to see the documentation. So documentation is very essential, and that documentation that is done in requirement engineering, that document is known as SRS. If the product is software, if the product consists of both hardware and software, then that is known as system requirement specification. The last step is requirement review. Review is being carried out to improve the quality of SRS. So review is a process whereby expert sits to assess the quality of the document that is being manufactured, that is being prepared. So they will check, they will have the check on the system, so that if there are certain aberrations or inconsistencies or certain shortcomings, those can be sorted out. So it may be also called requirement verification. It is a continuous activity that is incorporated in elicitation, analysis and the documentation. The primary output of the requirement engineering we already stated is the requirement specification, that is in a document that is known as SRS. Now associated with it are the two steps, that is feasibility study. Feasibility study, that is the input. So the feasibility study. So feasibility study involves the analysis of the problem and the collection of all the relevant data or the information relating to the product. The main aim of the feasibility study is to determine whether it would be financially and technically feasible to develop a product, whether the product that we want to develop is financially viable. Can we develop it within our budget or not, or do we have the technology expertise to develop the product, and what will the impact of developing the product on the surroundings. So the collecting data items are analyzed to arrive at the following. First is abstract problem definitions, formulation of the different solution strategies, and analysis of alternative solution strategies to compare their shortcoming. So what is the purpose of feasibility study? The purpose is the evaluation or the analysis of the potential impact of a proposed project or the program, and the focus what are the main focus, that is the product concept viable, whether we can be developing that product or not, will it be possible to develop the product that match the vision statement of the customer side, what are the current estimated cost and the schedule for the project, how much it will cost, how much time it will take, how many members are required, do we have all the resources to cater to it, is the specification complete and stable enough to support the remaining development work. Now requirement elicitation, also known as requirement gathering phase. Here the requirements are identified with the help of customers and existing processes if they are available. Requirement elicitation is the most difficult, perhaps the most critical, more error prone, most communicative intent aspects of the software engineering. So we can use various techniques for requirement gathering. Requirement gathering can be done through interviews. Interview may be open interview or it may be a set interview, that is the agenda is decided. Or we can use the brainstorming session, we can use the surveys, we can use the we can use the surveys also for requirement analysis. We can also use QFD, we can also use fast approach for this. Requirement elicitations always involves the technical staff working with the customer to find out the application domain, the service that the system must provide, and the operational requirements. It may also involves all the end users, managers, engineers in maintenance, domain expert, trade unions, etc. All these peoples are collectively known as the stakeholder, that is, they have to develop the software. So, various methods are the interview. First is interview. The interview methods. After receiving the problem statement from the customer, the first step is to arrange a meeting with the customer. During the meeting or the interview, both the party would like to understand each other. The purpose of conducting an interview is to understand the customer expectations from the software. Now, the interview may be open-ended or the structured interview, and the various types of employees may be involved. The entry level, some of the entry level employee may be involved, some of the middle level may be involved, manager may be involved, and most importantly the customer. Second type is brainstorming session, which is a group technique whereby we have a lot of peoples to generate new ideas. It promote innovations, critical thinkings. So, after a discussion, a long list of requirements is being prepared, then they are categorized, then they are prioritized, which one is more essential, which one is less essential, and which one is not at all required, that is pruned or trimmed down. So, basically here the idea is to generate views, not to oppose each other, as we usually think. Idea is to have new ideas from the intended stakeholders. So, groups may be formed on the basis of users, middle level manager, or the total stakeholders. Next is fast approach, facilitated application specification technique. It is simpler to brainstorming session, and it is a creation of customer and the developer. So, in order to have this approach, we have certain guidelines, that is, the place must be neutral. It should not be either customer side or the developer side, so that the biased environment is not there. It is more formal as compared to our brainstorming. It is more formal. Agenda should be there to flow of ideas. Appoint a facilitator. We have to appoint a facilitator or a moderator. We will be preparing a definition mechanism worksheet, etc. And participants should not criticize or debate. Now, what are the various activities? Every participant must present his or her list. We will be combining the list. We will be having the joint discussion on the list, and finally, on the basis of consensus, a list is being prepared, that is known as the consensus list. Then there are sub teams for each mini specifications, then presentations of those mini specifications, and we will be having the validation criteria to determine whether the specifications are correct or not. Then sub team to draft specifications. Now, QFD is basically meant to incorporate the voice of the customer, that is, here we have to create the technical documents and it has to be documented. Then primary concern here is customer satisfaction. So, QFD is basically all about the customer satisfaction, that is what is more important to the customer. So, there are three types of requirements on basis of this. Normal requirement, what the system has to do. Expected requirement, that it is desirable from the system. Exciting requirements, that is extraordinary things that a system must do. So, all these are the 4 different methods of requirement elicitations that we have studied today. We will be discussing some more aspects in upcoming lecture series. Thank you everyone. Jai Hind.